Hi, I'm Matt Lifschatz from Riskified's New York City offices, and I head up our partnerships team. And today I'd like to talk to you a bit about growing your e-commerce business globally and how fraud could impact that growth, and then also ways that Riskified can help mitigate that risk. So, when thinking about the challenges related to fraud growing globally, there's a few areas that come to the top of my mind. The first is data mismatches, and this is when things like billing and shipping don't add up. So thinking about, you may see an order with a French credit card, a German IP address that's shipping to the UK, and your existing fraud rules and filters that are built for domestic transactions might automatically decline these orders with such mismatches. So they can result in a high manual review and also false declines. Thinking also about unique buying patterns that may take place. So people in markets that you're growing into can purchase products differently from your more traditional customers. So international shoppers are more likely to use things like reshippers to reduce their shipping costs. Also, you'll find that in China, legitimate customers tend to use proxy connections to complete their purchases. And so if you don't have the prior knowledge of these behaviors, you're going to find that you're going to be turning away good customers and possibly incurring chargebacks. Also, on different time zones, you have to think about reviewing orders in the time zone that your shopper is buying in. So if someone is purchasing a good from your shop in Australia at 4 p.m. and your operations are in New York City, it's midnight at that time. So are you staffed if you need to manually review a transaction, or is it going to create a long fulfillment time for your buyer? And then lastly, unlimited information. So if you're needing to gather the necessary information based on a new region that you're selling into, it's costly and time consuming. And if you don't know what data enrichment is needed in a certain market, take Brazil, you run the risk of falsely declining or, more importantly, missing a fraud indicator. So there's an impact that you have to consider, and these impacts that we talked about are chargebacks, false declines, and customer friction. And so if you are approving customers that are fraudulent, this is when you're going to incur chargebacks. And what Riskified provides our merchants is a 100% guarantee on chargebacks. Also, falsely declining, which is extremely impactful, especially as you're growing into new markets. If you're falsely declining a customer the first time that they're entering your shop, there's a very strong likelihood that they're not going to come back and shop for you again. And so with Riskified, we offer higher guaranteed approval rates. An important note to consider is that we, on average, approve 30 to 70% of transactions that our merchant clients were previously declining. And this is especially important as you're growing into new markets. And the last piece is on reducing customer friction. If customers are forced to take extra steps like multi-factor authentication, or if you're emailing them or calling them and trying to verify their identity, it could result in a higher drop-off and cart abandonment. And so Riskified, we provide instant decisions on every single transaction that's sent to us. So what you can expect is that your customer is able to complete their natural shopping flow and go about their day. So a little bit more about Riskified and who we are. As you probably realize, we're an e-commerce fraud management solution, and we have global offices both in New York City and Tel Aviv. Currently, we have just over 1,000 global retailers, and we're set to review more than $12 billion in transactions in 2017. And of those transactions, with many Fortune 500 companies. So some of the advantages of working with Riskified is that we support all payment gateways and currencies. We're agnostic to that. We've reviewed transactions from approximately 200 countries around the world, and we utilize localized data sources and country-specific modeling, which is important because if you're entering a new geographic region, you have to understand the types of buyers and data sources that are utilized in order to be accurate on the decisions that you're making. This is an area where Riskified has spent an extraordinary amount of time building their models and infrastructure. So how does Riskified work? Well, as a merchant, you're only charged for orders that Riskified approves. So we're naturally incentivized to approve as many transactions as possible since our P&L is aligned with yours. And we maintain complete transparency during the entire process for your customer. After the payment, Riskified reviews the transaction using a combination of data enrichment based on the region, our extensive global network of transactions across many different verticals, and machine learning models based on your industry. Then you can expect to receive an immediate decision whether to accept the transaction or decline the transaction. And I mentioned that we're completely frictionless to your customer. Your customer will never know that Riskified is sitting there. The decision and the review take place after checkout and no impact on the experience. So the customer is either going to receive the email that says, hey, your shipping is taking place, or a decline and noting that there was a problem with their order. So how does Riskified affect your ROI and your bottom line? Well, there's a few different ways, and the first is by reducing your operational costs. So after working with Riskified, you can expect to spend nothing on chargebacks and related fraud costs because Riskified takes on that liability. Your manual review will drastically decrease or be eliminated because Riskified provides an immediate decision on every transaction that we review. And you can also expect that your reliance on developers and IT, on rewriting your rules and updating them on a periodic basis will be removed because Riskified is consistently updating its models to support fraud as your business grows domestically and abroad. And then we can also help you uncover new revenue opportunities. And this is extremely important as you're thinking about growing globally. So you can start removing any types of fraud filters and payment restrictions that you've had at your gateway level, and you'll start to see that your false positive declines are going to be eliminated. I mentioned about how much Riskified approves out of our customers' declines, and again, I want to stress that this is extremely important as you expand overseas. And you can start thinking about new product flows, things like buy online and pick up in store. That's typically a really tricky fraud to review, and Riskified handles that for many of our merchants. And then accepting new payment methods. As you're expanding into new markets, you can expect to see new ways that customers buy and new methods of payment that you may not be familiar with. As mentioned, Riskified is agnostic to any payment method, and we're able to review, approve, and provide a chargeback guarantee on any transaction and any payment method that you send to us. And then when thinking about actually what Riskified provides for our clients, it's transparency. So we realize that fraud is just part of the puzzle, and we aim to manage that part for you so that you can start to achieve any additional business goals that you have. And so transparency into our decision is very important for our clients. And in doing that, we provide real-time performance tracking, so you always know where you stand with Riskified, any type of exportable reporting that you are going to require, and then a clear decision around any decline that takes place. And here's just a sample of our web application. And you can see through this chart that allows you to track performance over time. You'll be able to see what's been declined. You'll be able to actually narrow down in what region, by what payment method. You'll also be able to see any chargebacks that may have occurred and where they may have occurred and when. And then what I really think is a very neat feature is our in-depth decision indicators. And you can look at this for any transaction that's been declined or approved and see why are the reasons that this transaction was declined. You can sort by the significance and also category, and then take a look at, even we have a radar graph to expand to the specific regions that were causing the most reasons and red flags for us. These are some of the global retailers that Riskified currently works with, and we've had success in helping them grow their revenue by expanding globally and decrease their risk of fraud. So a few case studies to leave you with. Skullcandy is one of our clients, and before working with Riskified, they had high costs from manual review and also a strong desire to increase revenue by growing into global markets. So they came to Riskified with their challenges, and we were able to completely eliminate their manual review costs and help them significantly with growth in both Canada and Europe. So if you're a retailer that's looking to expand into new markets, it may make sense to talk to Riskified and see ways that we can help. So another client of ours is Burton. And before working with Riskify, they had an extremely high manual review time, and that led to delays in fulfillment and certainly a customer friction. And so after partnering with us, they are significantly able to reduce their time and overall order review, and they've also increased their approval rate to approximately 99%. So if you're a merchant that's looking to expand globally, or if there's any other fraud challenges that you do have, I encourage you to reach out to us, and we'd be glad to talk to you about your overall business needs and see if there's a way that Riskified may be able to positively impact you. Thanks so much for your time.